The absence of pain is a wonderful thing. Totally worth looking at the food ingredients or making your own food, preparing it, buying it local from a trusted vendor. Quality food that's not processed is everything as far as neurological function. It's 100% worth it.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada-Gore. This is episode 89, and my guest is Jodi Ledley. Jodi is the author of Adventures with Jodi, How One Girl Stopped Migraines and Chronic Pain and Accidentally Improved Her Family's Health. Jodi's story is riveting. She actually saw 19 doctors and endured medical treatment after medical treatment before she got to the root cause of her debilitating migraines. She discusses all that she did and how she finally came upon the root cause of the problem in today's show. Before we get into the conversation, we want to thank our sponsors. Wise Traditions is supported in part by Chelsea Green Publishing, the politics and practice of sustainable living. Now an employee-owned company. Learn more at chelseagreen.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. Their Wise Traditions Conference is coming up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, November 10th to the 13th. There are 36 new speakers covering all kinds of topics. You have to be there. Join us and take your health to new heights. You can still get the early bird price if you register soon. So go to wisetraditions.org to find out more. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Jodi.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I understand that you have suffered with migraines for most of your life. Can you tell us that story? When did they begin and what was that like?
Sure. I've actually had migraines, I'd say it was probably about the time of, puberty and on. And a lot of women have that problem. They diagnose you as menstrual migraines or, hormonal migraines or something like that. But at some point, something triggered these, what I call normal migraines, into severe, debilitating migraines.
Can you describe the difference to us?
Oh, yeah. Well, any migraine is bad, but what I call, people will say headaches, and sometimes they'll call headaches migraines. But a migraine to me is I lose peripheral vision. I have vision disruption. They call it an aura. But that leads very quickly to severe pain, which leads to severe vomiting. And then after that, maybe laying on the floor for 3 days. So it's very, very, very severe.
Yeah, for those of us who have never had a migraine, we hear it and just think, oh, it's a headache, and the person might say, I have a migraine, I need to lie down. But when you say debilitating, you're not kidding around.
No, these are emergency room visit migraines, and that's only if you can make it there. I went so many times to the emergency room, and you'll hear people say, well, I've never, I've stuck through mine and never went to the ER. Well, maybe they didn't have one like this. This was, you think maybe you've had an aneurysm or something has gone terribly wrong in your head. And a lot of times I couldn't even make it there because I was throwing up too hard to get in the car, or I remember my husband taking me in the middle of the night one night and I was throwing up so hard that I smacked my face on the front of the car. There's no way to understand that type of pain unless you've endured it. It's really unreal.
Yeah, it sounds miserable. And so when you got to the ER, what would they do for you?
Well, they have something called the migraine cocktail. And interestingly, in the migraine cocktail is Benadryl. It's Benadryl and then a couple other pain medications. But that really never, it would just calm me and stop the vomiting, and I still felt terrible. I would feel terrible for days. It was like a 3-day recovery time. And when these had become debilitating, it was pretty much constant. There would be, really bad episodes, and then I would feel not like myself for days, and more really bad episodes. Migraines are really very closely related to seizures, so you're just not yourself at all. So,
Wow.
that the ER visit wasn't a fix. It was just little bit of temporary pain relief, if that.
Right, and you're saying it wasn't a fix. It makes me think of a young girl I know who's in college right now who has found no relief whatsoever. They pop up unexpectedly, and she is relegated by her own volition, but, sidelined from her college experience for a number of days because of the same thing. And it seems like she hasn't found any answers. Is that how most migraine sufferers experience this?
That is everyone's problem. There is no help for any migraine sufferers, and I can say that because I saw 19 doctors and racked up $70,000 worth of medical bills trying to find the cause, trying to find any kind of relief. I mean, it was getting to the point where I was going to have to be on disability. It was that bad. That's one reason why, I wrote my book. It's because I did find the cause for me, and it turns out the cause for me was the cause for my whole life. Mm-hmm. People say, well, they've got all sorts of triggers. The weather's the trigger, heat's a trigger, certain foods. But really what your trigger is when you have really sensitive nerves. A lot of different things can become triggers, and you can't really pinpoint what the cause is.
Oh, so it's kind of like, yes, for each person, it might be a different thing that triggers it, but the root is that everyone has these sensitive nerves.
Well, yeah, the root is excitotoxicity. That was the main, it was like a light bulb moment. I had what I call the breakdown day, where I'd been through, it was a week's worth of doctor's appointments. I went to a very world-renowned medical facility that had a doctor's appointment for me. It was 8 hours, and it cost $1,500 out of pocket, and they didn't have any additional suggestions to what I'd already done. I had done all of the regular migraine medicines, and then I had done Botox for migraines, which is where I got 30 shots in the head and the neck I think it was about every 3 months for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then it wore off. It helped keep away the big ones to cover them up, but, I was kind of functional, helped a little, but then it started to wear off. And my last appointment was with a pain doctor, and he said, well, I think at this point you're getting to where you're not going to be able to tolerate this pain, and they wanted to put an implant in my spinal cord called a neurostimulator. And luckily, I was sitting in the office listening to him talk, and I was looking at the pamphlet for this surgery that he had recommended, and it had a lady jogging with her dog. And I just knew if I had that surgery, that's not how it was going to be. So luckily, I didn't get that. But when I left there that day, I was so upset because here I am young, and I've got the perfect family, and everything's going right, except I just can't get control of my health in any way. It was like a sinking ship. So I got home that day, and I was so upset, and I didn't even tell my husband what he had said. I couldn't even talk about it. But I started searching for things on the internet because the doctor said, your nerves are all firing, and I don't know why. They're rapid firing is what he said. And when I typed that in, I got the word excitotoxins.
Oh. And until that time, you hadn't heard about excitotoxins.
I hadn't heard that word, no, but I did shortly after that hear it. And that gave me, seeing that, well, first I should say what excitotoxins are.
Yes.
Excitotoxins are substances that make nerves rapid fire. Now, most of the time, it's a food additive, but they are in perfumes and different chemicals, and I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people that have migraines have a lot of trouble being around fragrances.
I've heard that. I have heard that.
So it's not in their head. It's not that they just dislike the fragrance. It's physically hurting them. So anyhow, I found the word, the meaning, and I had some hope. And I thought, well, this is one more thing I can try, because I would have tried anything. But I think it was maybe 2 weeks later, at one of our local Weston Price meetings, we had a doctor, Dr. Feaster of Ralston, Ohio. He was talking about chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, which I don't know if I was ever officially diagnosed as having fibromyalgia, but they were trying to give me fibromyalgia drugs. So they just didn't know what was wrong with me, and pain was everywhere. Well, he had mentioned MSG was under 70 different names. I had no idea. I had went to that world-renowned place, And they said, in their list of triggers was MSG.
Which is monosodium glutamate, right?
Right. But I was just looking for that, MSG or monosodium glutamate on the ingredients. But in reality, it was in 95% of the foods that were processed. It was just under other names, things like yeast extract or soy protein or any protein isolate, and many, many more.
So, Jodi, just to summarize, you were trying to avoid this food additive because you knew it could provoke a trigger and a migraine response. And so you were doing fine avoiding MSG, but it really is in all these foods under different names, so you were probably ingesting it unwittingly.
Yeah. They told me to avoid it, and it wasn't avoiding it. I didn't think that food was my problem because avoiding MSG didn't help me at all, but I didn't realize all the other names it was under. So yes, I was still eating tons of it all the time. The difference between a good day and a bad day for me was dosage. I've seen cakes in the bakery that have 30 of these ingredients in it.
30.
So that's a lot of MSG.
Oh my gosh. People have no idea. I had no idea.
No, and then here's the thing that makes it even more difficult is, my reactions are very severe, but they're delayed. It's 24 to 36 hours later.
So that makes it difficult to find the association, right?
It is. It makes it very hard. And they would tell me, all these doctors will make a food diary. Well, the normal person is going to write down cheeseburger cake. They're not going to write down the 100, and I've counted. Some of these bakery cakes have 100 different ingredients.
Wow.
That it's just not going to help you unless you actually read every label. And then there's something else, is that MSG can be formed, free glutamate. Glutamate's the G in MSG. But free glutamate, high levels of it can be formed when you heat something to high, unnatural temperatures.
Uh-huh.
So you can take for instance, broth, and you can heat it super, super high temperatures, and it can create a form of MSG.
Whoa, so this is important for our listeners to know because a lot of our listeners aspire to eat as healthily as possible. Many follow the Wise Traditions diet, and they're thinking, I'm going to have some broth. But they might also, without knowing it, accidentally form this glutamate, which can be a toxin, by heating their broth too high. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It can affect them and not others. If you're somebody that is already, or anyone with a neurological problem that has sensitive nerves, it can bother you. But what you can do is you can make sure you don't cook your bone broth for over 3 hours.
Oh.
That greatly helps those people.
Coming up, how Jodi's family's health improved when they got rid of the additives and chemicals in their diet. We want to pause now and thank our sponsors. Chelsea Green Publishing. Chelsea Green Publishing is recognized as a leading publisher of books about organic farming and gardening, homesteading, local food, restorative living, and diet-focused integrative health. Some recent and best-selling health titles include Human Heart, Cosmic Heart by Dr. Tom Cowan, The Alzheimer's Antidote by Amy Berger, and The Metabolic Approach to Cancer by Dr. Nasha Winters and Jesse Higgins Kelly. Learn more about these titles and other books at chelseagreen.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. Please join us at the Wise Traditions Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota, coming up November 10th to the 13th. There is so much good stuff going on at that conference. 36 new speakers are coming, including Jodi Ledley, of course, and they're covering all kinds of topics like cooking with spices, nourishing your neurons, protecting against Alzheimer's, and how the fountain of youth might actually be a water fountain. So come on and join us and take your health to new heights. Go to wisetraditions.org and register today. So, Jodi, what would you say to the person who says, girl, you just found something on the internet. Just because you read it on the internet doesn't make it true. Like, you were all interested in this excitotoxins thing, but what if it was just a random, did anyone dismiss you? Or are there skeptics out there who are like, what are you talking about? This doesn't have to do with your migraines.
I don't know if anyone that saw me, there's no skeptics. That's for sure, because I was not well. And as it turns out, as more proof, every member in the household has resolved health issues by getting rid of those food additives. and chemicals that were around us. But, like, for instance, my daughter, I think she was 3 at the time. She was starting to have some, what I would call ADD symptoms, ADHD. I couldn't understand why she was acting the way she was acting. That was all resolved when we went to real food, simple ingredients, got the chemicals out of our food. My son had asthma, and he was really, when you look back, he was overweight, and I didn't think of him as overweight at the time because it seemed normal to me. He dropped the weight, the asthma was gone, and, we started doing 5Ks together, which he couldn't do before. He couldn't make one lap around our house without not feeling well. He would just sit down. He wouldn't exercise at all. So, my husband, he had high blood pressure. It's just been, when he had sinus problems, too, which is really interesting. His sinus problems went away, and now I have discovered that there's a certain bacteria that if people are lacking it, they will get chronic sinus infections. So all of our fermenting and all of that stuff has really eliminated so much.
Is this why in your book it has that subtitle, How One Girl Stopped Migraines and Chronic Pain and Accidentally Improved Her Family's Health? In other words, you didn't expect for this side Benny to happen with your family, did you?
I didn't expect it, and I really thought all of their problems were normal. I mean, recently I found in the closet a nebulizer. Do you know what that is?
I do, but go ahead and tell us in case the listeners don't.
It's a machine for albuterol for people who have asthma. And I was like, well, there's my machine there, and I haven't used it in years. But then I opened the box, and there were prescriptions with both my kids' names on it. They were using it, too, both of them. It's just things like that you forget. I mean, I was there constantly. They were on antibiotics all the time. My daughter had strep 11 times one summer.
Oh, my goodness.
Never again did she have strep. So
wow.
I just feel like, for one, I can't stand the thought of someone suffering with migraines like I did because, this is something you could easily try to see if it would get rid of them, and it's helped many of the people around me. And then secondly, the whole change with the kids. It's so obvious to me now what's going on in the world is food-related, the lack of quality food. Something else I talk about in my book is finding out that a lot of the drugs that are given, and especially to teens, ADD, ADHD, anxiety medication, the mechanism of action is they block glutamate.
No way.
Yeah, and I just want to shout it from the rooftops. Just get this stuff out of your food, and you just feel so much better.
That is a really key point, and I hope our listeners hear it. So the young people that are on these meds, we think, okay, the little pill is the solution, but you're saying there's a way around that if we simply get rid of the glutamate ourselves rather than going to the medicine.
Right. And the sad thing is that a lot of these girls with anxiety, a lot of them are the girls, and it's sad that they think there's something wrong with them because there's not. Mm-hmm. It's what's being done to them through our food system.
Well, let's get into that again. I want to back up a bit. When you first mentioned excitotoxins, you said that it was like your nerves were rapid firing all the time. So are you saying that glutamate and other things in our diet are causing those nerves to rapid fire, and when you pull them out, it solves the problem? Right, and it's specifically free glutamate. The body actually needs glutamate, has glutamate receptors, but the problem is, regular glutamate is bound, so it absorbs really slowly, and that's good, doesn't affect nerve function. Free glutamate, the body can't tell the difference, and it's, mega doses. So that's really, really disrupting your nerve function, and it can even make nerves rapid fire until they die. So going back to just good quality food that's not processed is everything as far as neurological function. So I want to ask you, what foods are the ones that we should avoid the most? Let's say I had a problem with anxiety or with ADD. What are the foods that are the biggest triggers for people, do you think, that contain maybe the most free glutamate? This is what people don't like to hear, but it's pretty much all of the foods. You hear about certain restaurant chains are, putting natural ingredients in, but then I look them up, and there's like 20 things in one soup that may mess with your nerves.
And it just boils down to you have to look at every single ingredient. If an easy way to just eliminate a lot of the excitotoxin ingredients is just to only buy foods with 5 ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
That eliminates a lot. You can learn all the names for MSG, which I eventually did, and that's very helpful. One of the easiest ways to know whether to eat something or not is whether it contains natural flavors. There are different food additives have different levels of the free glutamate in them, and it's getting pretty easy to find foods without the main causes. Mm-hmm. And the very last one that's hardest to get rid of is natural flavors because it's in everything.
And Jodi, it sounds so good, natural flavors.
You would think, but it's actually a legal loophole. Natural flavors, the company does not have to disclose what's in that. And many times it's things that have been highly processed, even in organic food, organic natural flavors. You have to worry about the formation of free glutamate, excessive levels of it.
Wow.
Now, I will tell you, you can make everything you would eat now and not have a problem if you were to home make it.
That's what I was about to suggest. I was going to say, for the people who don't want to memorize all the names of MSG, right, and to whom it might be like memorizing the periodic table or something, if they don't want to go there, all they have to do is buy the ingredients from the farm or grow their own food and make most of their food at home, because you can really control what's in it that way.
Yeah, you can. And buying locally, that's a lot better choice. I was at a major retail grocery store that I love, and one day I noticed they were putting natural flavors in their fresh ground beef.
Oh, you're kidding.
You would assume fresh ground beef would be okay, but you can't. You can't assume anything anymore. But
how did you find that out, Jodi? Did you just go up to the butcher or something? How did you find that out?
I actually they have to put that on the label. Most people wouldn't even think to read a label on fresh ground beef.
No, I wouldn't think to do that.
You have to. You have to, because they're cutting corners everywhere. But here's the silver lining, is that it's been about 5 years since I discovered what was the cause, and it has gotten so much easier to find foods. There's many prepared foods in the grocery store, especially Kroger's. I don't know if there's a Kroger in your area, mm-hmm, but I can get everything there. I used to have to go to Whole Foods, and for me, that's an hour-and-a-half drive. So it's in demand. People are wanting their food as real food, not with all the chemicals and additives, and it's a good thing. And I can tell you, this is kind of exciting news. I went 5 years without eating in any kind of restaurant, which is shocking.
Yeah.
And last week, I found a restaurant that I could eat at without incident. Oh. And that restaurant is Chipotle.
No way.
Yeah. They were so close last year. Their tortilla had xanthan gum in it, which for people who are gluten-free, they're going to be eating in their tortilla and bread, or bread-like products. They're going to be eating xanthan gums and all the other gums, but those are on the list for MSG as well. Mm. So that would be something you'd want to avoid if you had a gluten problem. But anyhow, they removed that, and it contains regular ingredients, the flour, the water, just the basics. And it was so nice that I was able to actually have one meal where with my family. It was great. And their ingredient, I checked out all of their ingredients, and I couldn't find any dish that had any form of MSG, which is really, really, really hard to find.
Absolutely. And, I think the foundation is working on this 12-spoon restaurant project, and what they want to do is help people, like do some of the research for them and have chapter leaders and folks around the U.S. who are members tell us which restaurants they would recommend, because it is a lot of work. Jodi, you're talking about these things and I'm thinking, wow, this woman is just a go-getter, because you had to, of course, your health was at risk, but you really pushed yourself to do some of that research, and not all of us would want to necessarily take that time. So I would say everyone just keep your eyes peeled for that 12-spoon restaurant app, because we really want to help people find places where they can find some decent food without a lot of these extra additives.
Oh yeah, that would be wonderful. Everyone needs that.
Totally. Well, as we prepare to wrap up, I want to ask you what I often ask my guests, and I'll be curious to see what you have to say. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do, Jodi?
Read the ingredient label. that will steer you in the right direction every time.
Well, that is fantastic. And I applaud you for all that you've done and for getting the word out. And I'm excited because you're going to be at the conference this November, right?
Yes. And I am so excited to share my story. I mean, there are so many women in particular that have the same problem as me, and they're going about their day on all their migraine medicines, just trying to make it. And if I could just morph them into my body and they could feel, I mean, the absence of pain is a wonderful thing.
Wow.
It's worth it. It's totally worth looking at the food ingredients or making your own food, preparing it, buying it local from a trusted vendor. It's 100% worth it.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, and I will meet you in person in November.
Great. Thank you.
My guest today was Jodi Ledley. Find out more about her at adventureswithjodi.com. That's Jodi with an I. And look for her on Facebook. Or just go to the westinaprice.org website, click on the Blogs and Podcasts tab, and go to the show notes for episode 89. Hey, and a big thank you to my friends at Podcast Village. Sarah Fernandez is my editor, and she is the Chief Editing Officer at Podcast Village. She is amazing. And Georgia Michaels is the intern this summer. She is awesome as well. Seriously, they are all pros there when it comes to training, producing, and promoting podcasts. Find out more at podcastvillage.com. And thanks also to intern Olivia Stanforth for her consistent help with show notes week after week. Her time with us is coming to an end, so if you are interested in volunteering and being an intern to help with the show, please just email us at podcast@westinaprice.org. Hey, and don't forget to follow me at Holistic Hilda on Twitter, at Holistic_Hilda on Instagram, and on Facebook, look for my Holistic Hilda page. I want to stay connected with you so I can support you on your wellness journey. And thanks.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.